Understanding references, and here the keyword is really understanding because there's a lot of misconceptions of what is a reference, how to use them, and why they matter. So in this part and the rest of the diamond, I'll clarify all this so that you then have a clearer understanding of when references can fit in your creative process and how to leverage their power in your day-to-day work. So first, what is a reference? Reference is the existing material that one can draw from in order to improve their own work. So material, as you can see, is very broad. It can literally be anything. Images, sounds, videos, live events, words. There's literally no shortage of mediums for what a reference can be. This is why you must remember to not limit yourself to the medium you're working in. If you're doing ArtViz, you can find great references in paintings from 300 years ago or on the latest Nike advertising campaign. One common misunderstanding also when it comes to reference is that people will just take a single image and copy everything about it. This is not the most interesting use of what a reference can do. References really are not images to copy stupidly. They're material you use to make your own work better in its own way. So a little bit more about references. References can serve multiple goals. The first is that they have a strategic purpose. Generally, for your work, you will not pick one reference, but many, and each references will serve a strategic purpose. Maybe the light of one image speaks to you, and the framing of another, and the color of another, and the props and layout used in another one, etc. Each reference should generally refer to a specific aspect of composition, so regarding intent, light, color, and frame, and subcategories of those core components. It is then up to you to combine them creatively into your own images. Sometimes the influence will be visible, but sometimes references can serve only as the start of the exploration process, and your final image will look different, which is completely fine. References are here to help you jumpstart your research process. We'll dive a bit deeper on this aspect later, but references should always be organized so that you can find them more easily. Of course, this will be dependent on the way you work. I tend to have a very specific categories I use because they reflect the way I compose my images and do my research. So of course, the main themes will be intent, light, color, and framing because this is how I understand composition. And then I will have more specific subjects more related to actual programs or composition elements, foreground, shapes, etc., that are more based on the type of brief my clients will submit to me, for example. The overall rule is that the general structure is up to you and should be based on how you think. It'll take a bit of trial and error. You can, of course, use mine as a base to experiment with, and there's no trademark on it. But the idea is that you need to have something to start with and always refine it as you go to see what are the categories that you need when you're using your references. When it comes to the process, references play a huge role in streamlining it and making you more productive, clear, and efficient. As I said earlier, references are paramount in the creative process. They are not images you copy, and they don't even have to actually end up being visible or noticeable in your end image. They just have to be the starting point of what you're trying to create. Further experimentation might make you drift away from those early references, but as long as you're mindful of the process and you have a reason for this drift, then everything is fine. Still, you wouldn't have drifted there without those early references, and this is what matters. More concretely, having visual aids will help you clarify the goal, which is the sort of overall compositional ideas you want to integrate in your final image, your artistic direction, if I may say. While we can sometimes perfectly visualize an image even without any references, it's actually always better to use references to double check and reinforce ideas. References properly used, meaning if you don't just copy them, will always lead you to create better and more complex images than if you were just starting from scratch. Another big aspect that can be interesting with references is that it can help you communicate more easily your goal with your client. Generally, you will be using mood boards and the likes in order to show already how an image might look. This will depend on the degree of abstraction your client is able of coping with, and this will be for you to judge, and you can basically just ask what they are comfortable working with. Either way, we'll discuss client relationship and process a bit more in Diamond 8 and 9. Also, still regarding communicating, you can use references to discuss artistic direction with your peers in your own studio and your own teams, which is very valuable. One last aspect that is good to be conscious of is that when you're using references, you're reassessing constantly your understanding of composition principles. If you remember the retroactive cycle I was talking about in Diamond 1, every time you spend time analyzing references, you make your own work clearer and you straighten your ability to communicate as well by clarifying your understanding of how an image works internally. References can be used at different stages in the image crafting process. I mainly talked about the fact that references can be used for artistic direction at the beginning of a project when you're trying to seek what is best ideas to explore for your project. But you can also use references a bit further down the road to check, for instance, material references and get your materials looking better, or check for specific light behaviors or scenarios in order to recreate them more accurately in your image. You can also adjust them based on clients' feedback and have like a new set of references coming in because your client changed his mind about something or whatever. Overall, you can use references for broad design ideas as well as detailed fine-tuning towards the end. If you want to add small elements to make your image have this sort of like extra element of believability and realism, references will be very important to have a base to start from. But the main idea to remember, on top of the fact that references are paramount in the creative process, is that it's not just a copy of an image. I think I've said that enough, but it's an image to deconstruct, analyze, and to use strategically in order to make your own image better. Even if you're just copying material, what you actually need to do is to deconstruct the effect you're looking for and understand it according to what a material is made out of: albedo, specular, reflection, refraction, bump, normals, etc. Same with a more general image, you're going to deconstruct it according to the core components we discussed: intent, frame, light, and color, and only then can you start implementing those in your own work in a creative and interesting manner.